Hi, this is Little Dwarf playing games while rambling incoherently into a microphone. Why? Well, just because I can, and I continue with Werewolf the Apocalypse, Heart of the Forest, Blind. I'm still here in the Białowieża village, and I've explored those two locations, which only leaves the abandoned railway, with the subtitle Lost Hopes and Strange Dreams. So, let's go. Train spotting. Bartek wants to show us the most picturesque spot in the area, said Anya. Maybe that's not the right word, he said, frowning. Well, it's not like it's that beautiful, but it has, you know, an atmosphere, climate, ambience. Enya said it at the same moment as I, and we laughed. Ambience, Bartek smiled, visibly relieved. I meant ambience. We ended up on some abandoned tracks. My rage is high. We soon left the village behind and ended on some abandoned railway tracks. This is a perfect place to meet a serial killer, I grumbled, looking at the overgrown tracks disappearing among the trees, but with the slow, winding river a stone throw away, and the long, drooping branches of the old trees shading the unused railway, the place really was picturesque. The bees buzzed around us, the birds sang like there was no tomorrow, and the fragrance of herbs hung thick in the air. My head was spinning. Apparently, I remember the song. I guess I can use... It doesn't seem dangerous. I'm wondering to see what happens if I sort of tap into my rage at least a little bit. So I guess I'll choose that. I was bursting with energy. Let's race to the trees, I shouted, and before they could react I was already running. Okay, I don't want to spend willpower on something like that. So apparently it was, even without it, it was an easy win. Oh, Bartek is cautious about me. I started with a jog and gradually sped up, but they never caught up with me. It was only when the shadow of the trees engulfed me that I stopped and looked back. Bartek and Anya were way behind, walking at a leisurely pace, talking and laughing. Jerks. so I guess they totally ignored me, and I just ran off on my own like a weirdo, which is kind of sad, really, because they stayed behind to talk and totally 100% ignored me. But I felt that someone was watching me. I heard a noise and turned around. A woman was standing around the trees. It was Lisa. How did she get there? How did you get here so fast? I couldn't help but ask. There are shortcuts, she didn't elaborate. She smiled. Since we're alone, I have some advice for you. She looked the way I'd come from. Don't get too attached to your friends there. It won't last. I didn't know what to say, so we just stood there, looking at one another. Do you mind if I join you? She asked when Bartek and Anya approached. I guess she's talking about... Because I'm pretty sure she must be a werewolf too. And she's probably talking about rage and how it drives regular people away from werewolves, because they sense that there's something unnatural and something dangerous about them. So they naturally want to get away, usually. I noticed Bartek getting tense. Yeah, actually he's already cautious about me. So, what's the story with you two? I asked Bartek. She's from around here. He shook his head. But she helps with the protests. You know, Lisa turned to me. The protest against the logging that his father so eagerly promotes. Oh, interesting. Bartek winced and snapped, I guess. Sorry, shouldn't we coexist with the forest? That means taking what we need to survive, just as everything does. 6,000 tracks of wood isn't taking what you need, kid. And he threw a glance at me, looking for help. Yeah, I do agree. Like, even disregarding the whole werewolf part, I feel like it's mind-boggling to take, one of the last remnants, this primordial forest, and log it down for wood. Like, that's insane for me. Especially because you can plant new trees, even for the purposes of logging them later, but obviously you have to do it far in advance because you have to wait for them to mature. So I feel like it's mostly convenience and greed winning over idealism in this case. But I do agree that she has a point. Like, it's not like I'm some kind of a primitivist or something. Like, it's not like I think that civilization is evil. I do believe people should be allowed to cut down trees to make furniture or houses or whatever. But really, do you have to do it in this place in particular? So I think she had a point. He doesn't like me. Don't look at me, Bartek. I think it's barbaric. I wasn't about to beat around the bush. If it was about local action, there wouldn't be a problem, Anya chimed in. But it isn't. Giant corporations are at work here with heavy machinery. Ask your friend about his father's money and his clients. Lisa shrugged. Bartek stormed away. I shrugged and followed him. Lisa followed me. We walked the narrow path. The path was too narrow for us all to walk together, so at some point I found myself walking with Lisa. She would squat from time to time and collect some herbs. So, you were looking for your roots, she said after a while. Why? I guess I couldn't resist the mystery. My mom is hiding something from me, I answered, and I couldn't resist the mystery. She sat down with me. She nestled among the roots of an old tree, reached into her basket, and took out a blunt. Let's have a smoke, and I'll tell you a story. She noticed when I hesitated. You need to hear it. Do I want to smoke it? To be honest, I myself probably wouldn't smoke weed offered to me by a person I just met. So I just sat down. Oh, there are graves in the forest. Interesting. Lisa let out a cloud of smoke and started talking. From what I learned from Bartek's grandma, you're asking the wrong questions about the wrong people. Apparently her voice was so soothing, and I do want to lower my rage to 2, just to be more in control of my actions, so I'm going to choose that. I closed my eyes and just went with the story. This is a tainted land, girl. So much blood was spilled that Pusha almost lost her mind. It's weird. If Maia knows Polish, why would she be weirded out by the word Pusha? Like, Pusha is an interesting word because I don't think it has a direct English translation. Pusha is a word used for like a very old primordial forest, and in fact the Białowieża forest in Polish is called Puszcza Białowieska, specifically because it's not just any other regular run-of-the-mill forest. It's a primordial forest, a remnant of a very old forest. That's what the word Puszcza means, and interestingly, it has connotations with the word pustka, which is the void, but like but it's more in the way. but it's more in the way of not exactly the void, but a place devoid of human activity, an untamed wilderness, something like that. So I guess it's more interesting that she refers to the Puszcza as her, because she personifies it, personifies the forest. Every word was gendered in Polish. Yeah, that's true. But I was pretty sure that the forest was male. Well, actually, I guess the game is Lisa, will explain this herself. So let's not, get too forward with that. Isn't forest a he? I call her Puszcza because it's her proper name, she huffled. Las is to Puszcza what dog is to a wolf. Domesticated, enslaved, used. Puszcza is the primeval forest, once untouched by humans, primal, strong and feared. Yeah, that is true. That is exactly what I talked about. Puszcza is a specific kind of forest. I don't think it has a very good English translation, but it's exactly what she says. Puszcza is a primeval forest, untouched by humans. And actually, Puszcza is feminine, because as Maia herself notices, every word is gendered in Polish, and las, the forest, is indeed masculine, but Puszcza is feminine. There was admiration in her voice, and I realized that the word sounded like the rustle of leaves, like the wind. Puszcza. As I was telling you, Puszcza almost went mad, and it's not wise to wake those spirits, especially not now. What spirits? You mean the dead? I asked. She looked at me with those uncanny eyes. Her gaze was almost unbearable, hard with anger, smoldering somewhere deep within it, ready to jump at my throat. And then suddenly something changed. Lisa sighed heavily. You have no idea, don't you? About what? About what? What do you mean? I asked. So, you have no idea who you are, she stated. Nobody told you what it was like here during the war and after it. Her eyes lost focus, and she was looking at something else, something that only she could see. In 1939, when the war broke out, first came the Germans and then the Russians. They actually worked together. Stalin never forgot that he was beaten by the Poles in 1920. She shot me a glance. Well, actually, I feel like that's common knowledge, like implying that somebody doesn't know. Like, I would be pretty weirded out if somebody didn't know that the Soviet Union collaborated with the Nazis in the beginning of the war. But I guess my perspective is tainted by the fact that I myself am Polish, and it's such a big, such an important facet of our history. The exact tales of suffering that Poland has suffered during World War II, and the two regimes, the Nazi regime, the Third Reich, and the Soviet Union, the two occupations. It's such an ingrained memory for us specifically that maybe I'm a bit biased in that. But I feel like her implying that I don't know that is kind of insulting. Like, let me know, maybe if you're not Polish yourself, if you're American, for example, if this is something that is taught in American schools, or... Because I'm pretty sure it has to be, right? Like, come on. It's such an important... even if you're not Polish, it's just very important to understand the dynamics between the Soviet Union and the Third Reich before the war, before the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941. So, I don't know. I guess I nodded politely. I didn't really care, but I nodded politely. Oh, you have no idea what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter, really. She took She took a drag. Anyway, many millions of lives later, Stalin and Hitler stopped sleeping together, so to speak, and the Germans came, and then the Russians again, and then there were the forest soldiers. The forest part got my attention. I nodded so she would continue. The forest part got my attention. They started as Polish soldiers, but then the war ended and they became guerrillas. Guerrillas? Guerrillas? I don't know. Guerrillas? I'm not really sure. I feel like my mind is kind of freezing. I don't... Guerrilla. I think you say it guerrilla. Guerrillas to fight the Russian occupation, and then they ended up as desperate bandits, she sighed. For the people who lived here, they were all the same. Germans, Russians, forest soldiers, they killed, they maimed, they tortured and burned villages. It didn't matter what language they spoke. Yeah, this is actually a very sore subject in Polish history, because I didn't know they were called... I don't think that's the forest soldiers is a name that's common in Polish. In Polish, those guerrilla fighters that continued to fight after the end of World War II, when Poland was given over to the control of Stalin, to the Soviet sphere of influence. Those people who didn't stop fighting, they are sometimes most commonly referred as żołnierze wyklęci, which means something like the cursed soldiers or something, and their whole history is very difficult and very it's very divisive, because there is a lot of back and forth between people who think that they were heroes, for fighting the Soviet occupation, and for not allowing themselves to align with the Soviets after even though officially the war has ended, the occupation for Poland didn't. So there are a lot of people who think that the cursed soldiers, they were heroes, but they were also engaged in a lot of very controversial stuff, up to and including killing civilians. Obviously not all of them, but I mean some of them. So it's not it's not that black and white really, and to be honest, nothing in the world is. But I wonder if the game will actually elaborate upon that more. That would be kind of interesting. I guess I wonder if my father might have been one of them, or well, I guess not my father, because my father would be too young, but maybe my grandfather. But what did it have to do with me? Yeah, that's an interesting question. Thanks for the history lesson, I said, but where do I fit into all this? My great-grandparents were from here, she sighed. After the war, there were some changes and my whole family was sent to Siberia to die. My grandmother was the only one who survived. She met a Buryat shaman, and here I am. But your story is tangled with all of this. She looked straight at me. Have you ever wondered what your grandfather did during the war? Suddenly I felt dizzy. I wanted to answer, but suddenly I felt dizzy. The smoke from her joint smelled funny, of forest moss, strange herbs, and ash and blood. Do I want to spend a point of willpower? No, I would like to, because I'm constantly locked in this loop of spending willpower and gaining it. Like I'm constantly tethering on the brink. So I guess I'll let myself drift away. Although that's kind of dangerous as well. Like I don't really know what's going to happen. But I was drifting away, I guess. What had she done to me? I tried to stand up, but the wave of smells and sounds and visions washed over me, and I drifted away. We were sitting around the fire deep in the puszcza. They knew the rules and they decided to break them, I say, and others nod their heads. We have to react or they'll stop respecting us. Apparently there must be a law. Am I having like a vision of my werewolf ancestors or something? Because that's something that's actually that actually happens in the tabletop game. You can, your character, if you're a werewolf, you can relive the memories of the past and directly contact your ancestors. There must be a law, apparently. Even in these cruel times, we needed a law. It's the only thing that keeps us apart from animals. Tomorrow we're going to burn a village. Wolves gather in the dark, waiting for a feast. Then the vision ends. When I came to my senses, Lisa was still looking at me. I got defensive. I don't want to be too low on rage, but I feel like getting defensive might... like, I would like to get the most information I can from her. So I guess I run it over in my head. If I understood what you were saying, I looked at her. Something from my family's past cast a shadow on my future? She shrugged. I told you everything I know. If you want more, talk to my girlfriend. We'll be at the logging site tomorrow. Yeah, good idea. Maia's grandfather was a forest soldier. Yeah, and apparently he burned at least one village, which I don't feel entirely comfortable with. But I guess that might have less to do with the fact of him being a forest soldier and more with the fact of him being a werewolf and angry all the time. Because in the vision they were talking about some kind of a violation, some law that the villagers have broken. I will, I said. Now I finally knew who and what to ask. There you are, Bartek waved at me. I thought I'd lost you. I said my goodbyes to Lisa and went back. The bison statues were watching me with their creepy painted eyes, as though they knew me. We called it a day and went back. And the first evening, the B&B was quaint. I left Anya and Bartek outside. They looked like they needed some time alone to say their goodbyes. When I got out of the shower, Anya was smiling and a little flustered. What a day, she smiled. So, what do you think? I made a quick mental inventory of everything that had happened that day. I mentioned the graveyard. I guess that was kind of interesting, especially with the salt circle. What happened here that the people are still vandalizing my family's grave? What did my grandfather do? Oh, apparently she's neutral. She was friendly to me earlier, so she must have been annoyed by something I did in the meantime. Well, nothing good, that's for sure, she sighed. I remembered the burning village in my vision and decided not to argue. They were cutting down the forest. I can't believe they're logging here. I shook my head. Isn't the forest on a UNESCO list or something? Yeah, I know. I want to check this protest people are talking about. Maybe we could go there tomorrow. Do I want to tell her what happened with Lisa? Like, I feel like... that might be... I guess I'll tell her. I wonder if the game will require me to click all of them anyway, in which case my current questions are moot. So I'll tell her about the scene in the shop first. Remember the shop? The tension seemed almost unnatural. A few words more and it would be a regular fight. Maybe they just envied Kim's style. Anya tried to joke, but she seemed worried. Now, yeah, I don't really want to tell her everything that happened with Lisa, because I feel like that would be breaking the veil. Like, I guess she was still pretty vague, but still. Do I want to risk it? Oh. Because I would have to tell her about the vision as well, right? Let's try it. I told her what happened when I talked with Lisa. Something weird happened when I was talking with Lisa. I think it was her joint, but I saw things. It looked like something from the past. Like, from your past? For a second I searched for words to explain it to her, but I couldn't really. I think it was my grandpa. It's hard to say, but it was sure weird. I shrugged, ending the topic. I didn't feel like talking anymore. You know what? I'm seriously tired. Let's call it a day, shall we? So we were both in our beds, ready to go to sleep. Even though I was tired, sleep didn't come quickly. Anxiety was spreading its cold, withering roots deep in my chest and stomach. I lay there for a time, looking at the silver rectangle painted on the wall by the moonlight. When I closed my eyes, I could still see the weird vision I had that day. My roots were here and I could feel them, almost touch them, and they were reaching to me. I felt I was closer to getting my answers. I should go and see the logging protest. I felt the answers I was looking for were within my grasp. I just had to go and see the logging protest, meet the right people and maybe make them talk. After a long while, all those thoughts became blurry, and they slowly started to turn into pictures, sounds and colors. I drifted off. A night in the woods. Oh, so I have another one of those dreams. I really like the aesthetic of those dreams. And in general, the aesthetic of this game is pretty interesting. As I said, it strays away from straight-up photorealistic depictions, and it's more kind of metaphorical almost. Like, I don't really know how to explain it properly, but it's very vision-like. It's like something. It's like not entirely out of our reality, which is very in line with the world of darkness, in my opinion. Anyway, a night in the woods. A lonely ray of moonlight shines on the broken nameplate and the old grave. Imprisoned under the cold, shiny stone, the dead wait for something. I tremble. Something is coming. It's huge and monstrous. I am a seed. Interesting. How would I even be thinking if I was a seed? No, I'm a cub. I'm a werewolf cub. I am a wolf cub, like the ones my grandfather told me about. I will grow and my fangs will become sharper. I will taste blood. I feel a pull and surrender to it. I run towards the clearing. There are piles of fresh corpses of people who died too young, skinned and mutilated. Their loved ones stand around them, grieving, unable to do anything, waiting, and suddenly they are just trees and tree trunks. That's a pretty gruesome scene. Is that me? I'm not sure. Yeah, I started dancing. I looked around, my nostrils flare. Who did it? Who murdered the trees? There is a stench in the air like meat rotting in acid, but somehow worse. I see the monstrous armies. Their mandibles are whirling chainsaws. Their long metal arms are wrapped with black pipes that look like glistening intestines. Their smell is vile. They wait, unmoving. Yeah, I will charge at them. It is a dream, and I would like to up my rage. Plus, I'm pretty sure from the description, those are the creatures of the worm, which are like the most direct enemy, like the greatest enemy that the werewolves have. So I feel like I would be amiss if I didn't charge at them. I try to breathe through my mouth as I run towards the machines. Oh, wait, machines? I hit and kick them blindly, screaming at the top of my lungs. And in my own screams I hear strange whispers. They tell me to look at the sky. There, between the stars, two shapes circle each other. An old, sad wolf with grey hair and a white weasel. They keep their eyes on one another as they continue their dance, suspicious but not hostile. We need to fight the enemy, the awful rotting stench, I know that much. But how can we do that when we just don't trust each other? They stop. They look at me and the clearing. I guess I can reprimand them to cooperate, presumably. So let me do that. Oh, Puszcza is sympathetic to me. Interesting. Stop it, you've wasted enough time. Once again, I don't recognize the words, but I understand. They come to me, and their voice is the voice of the Puszcza. Welcome back, you've been away for too long a time. I wake up. Chapter 2, Logging. Okay. The day after, the next morning was full of sunshine and birdsong. I could smell the heat of the afternoon building, these long honey-like hours? What? Honey-like hours? What does that mean? In late June, when the earth isn't tired of its own warmth yet, but it was crisp and pleasant now. I got up. I sat on my bed for a moment, letting my feet dangle from it. I wasn't sure how I felt. The weight of the previous day has coiled up somewhere in my chest, and it felt like a tiny merry-go-round, gaining speed. And then there was a dream. Then I remembered the dream, the clearing, the animals in the night sky, waiting for me. I took a shower and ate something without really paying attention, and went out. Anya joined me. We were halfway through the forest when I realized we were walking towards the logging site. Forest logging site. Protests, activists, answers. Well, let's go. Against the machines. I was running all of the options over and over in my head, and I didn't really care where I was going. When I looked up, the sun was shining, the village was far behind, and I was at the logging site. Anya looked around. So what's the plan? It says here, stop the logging in the Białowieża forest, and there is also I love Puszcza. I can't read that because it's obscured. Maybe they will move away later. No, actually I do want to stop the logging. I feel like that's my duty, not only as a person concerned with nature in general, but specifically as a werewolf. True to the name and themes of this game. We have to stop the logging. I looked around. On my right was the ancient forest. On my left was the freshly torn clearing. Ahead of me, ruining the view, were huge logging machines and a group of people arguing in their shadows. It was clear they needed an outside voice to settle the dispute. I guess I'll try to engage in the discussion. I have 2 points of willpower to spend, so I feel like I can make a difference. I looked at everyone. There were people there too. The loggers were sitting idly on tree trunks, sharing cigarettes. The police that stood between them and a colorful group of protesters were visibly uneasy and twitchy. I saw some reporters who were clearly bored because no one was doing anything interesting. The harvesters loomed over the clearing, reeking. I saw a familiar face among the protesters. Olga was arguing with a man in his 30s who looked vaguely military. The protesters were clearly conflicted. Maybe I could solve the conflict? I thrived in solving conflicts, so I went closer. One of the police officers, young and nervous, said something I didn't fully understand. I guess I'll smile at him. I am a foreigner. I have had a right to not understand what he said, because presumably he said it in Polish. And I feel like a smile at the right time can really diffuse a situation, especially if you're a good-looking person. I'm not sure if I am. Like, it's difficult for me to tell. She's clearly not ugly by any stretch of the imagination. I smiled. Oh, police is sympathetic. I smiled at him and said, I don't understand, in my best Polish, which would be nie rozumiem, by the way. He smiled back. Oh, he said, you're one of them, and then let us go. Then I noticed someone joined us. And then I noticed that someone used the commotion to sneak with us past the police. A girl with disheveled, bleached-out hair. Don't worry, she patted the officer on the arm. It was an awful pick-up line anyway. He recoiled. You shouldn't touch me, ma'am. I guess I'll keep smiling. It seemed to have worked quite well previously. Oh, I smiled at her. I smiled at her and wanted to say something, but I was interrupted. Pat, some guy called her from the gathering. Would you come here? I need you to show Olga that chart. She sighed, reaching to her backpack and taking out a tablet. And they're at it again, she murmured under her breath and winked at me. Coming. We went toward the activists. As I walked towards Olga, I heard more and more of the argument. Olga, you can't. The man was speaking with a strong German accent. Pat stood next to him with her tablet. She looked a bit amused. Do not fucking tell me what I can or cannot do, Colonel. Olga interrupted. I can because they are destroying our mother. I can fight with all the means that are at my disposal, even if that means burning those harvesters to the ground. A slender, green-eyed man was standing near her. He took a few steps back towards one of the harvesters, turned back on us, and pissed on the machine. Olga smirked. Oh, Daniel, you really know how to bring the point home. He looked at her confused. Colonel raised his eyebrows. Burn the harvesters? Colonel asked calmly. In this drought? Olga, you're out of your mind? You know what I mean. We fight them any way we can, because this is a fucking war, she spat. He sighed. You have never seen a real war, and it shows. Nobody's shooting at us, and believe me, we want it to stay that way. We need a peaceful protest. I approached Olga. Hi, we need to talk, I said, approaching Olga. Listen, I'm in the middle of something here. We can talk later. In the middle of something? Normally, I would wait for them to finish, but this was important. I looked at them. I looked at them both, Olga with her fury and passion, Colonel with his cool professional demeanor, and shared without any reservation what I felt about the situation. I definitely don't agree with that. Like, I feel getting violent is going to only have adverse effect because it's going to attract negative publicity. And the media will portray the protesters as, as the ones that are the troublemakers, and that they are guilty of making the situation worse if they get violent. So I feel like that goes nowhere, despite the instincts of the werewolves and what their rage might tell them. In this particular situation, I don't think. I think there is indeed a fine line to tread. Oh, apparently Cornell is unfriendly because I said that. But there is a fine line to tread, I said in silence. You don't want the protesters to be painted as terrorists, and you don't want them to be treated as irrelevant and ignored. Yeah, that's true. I especially agree with the first part. I feel like that would, like, getting violent in this situation would get you nowhere. Kim shook their head and moved forward. I observed them curiously. Olga, darling, you know I love you, but Cornell really knows what he's doing. Please, trust me on this one. They looked at her apologetically. Fuck off, Kim. You don't even trust me enough to come here on your own when I asked you to. Lisa decided to say something. Lisa looked them straight in the eye. She had a peculiar accent. Kim, you want to teach me about violence? She looked them straight in the eye. About fighting oppression? Just because your boss went to do what? One mission in Afghanistan? Her Polish was peculiar, kind of mellow. Cornell winced. Lisa, leave Kim alone. He didn't know what to say, and it seemed that the whole discussion would be derailed. I didn't let that happen. I have some willpower to spare. Hey guys, the forest, I said, the logging, the protest. Olga unclenched her fists. Cornell looked back at me and chuckled softly. You almost punched me. Wait, did I? I don't think I did. The conversation was over, at least for the time being. Cornell, together with his cronies, walked towards the reporters, while Olga went back to the group of people standing in the shadow of an old oak tree. I looked at the forest. Puszcza is sympathetic. I looked at the Puszcza. The clearing full of felled trees looked like a gaping, bleeding wound in the chest of a friend. My resolve strengthened. I came here to stop the logging, and after seeing what I'd seen, my resolve only strengthened. Yes, just like Olga said, Anya nodded, excited. What they are doing is unforgivable, and we have to fight. I looked at one group, I looked at the other. The logging site. The harvesters were dripping black oil, and the forest stood tall, serene, and full of golden light. It looked like it could protect itself, and then I looked at the felled trees, dead, limp, and helpless. And I feel like this is a decent place to end the episode, because it has been long enough. So I'm going to pause it here. That's all for this one, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!